Hello everyone, I'm Geek Freak and welcome to the video. This is a video that's been a long time coming, and this video might actually piss off a few people, but hey, if you guys know me, I never ever bend the knee to anybody, and I'm just gonna straight up say it. I prefer 2003 Fullmetal Alchemist than I do to Brotherhood. Now listen, don't get me wrong, Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood has its good moments, it follows the manga, the animation looks nice, etc, etc. Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood has its great moments, but it also has its problems as well, and it isn't perfect. Now, I know for a fact that I'm going to get a lot of crap from the Brotherhood fans, saying that, oh, what are you talking about? Brotherhood is fantastic, it's a masterpiece. It's much better than the 2003 one, and it follows the manga. Wait, listen. Brotherhood is good in its own way. Think as Brotherhood and 2003 as their own versions, like Dragon Ball GT or Dragon Ball Super. Some people prefer GT, some people prefer Super, some people prefer Brotherhood, some people prefer 2003. Now here's the thing, if you guys prefer Brotherhood, then that's perfectly fine with me. I'm not knocking you guys for liking Brotherhood, but to me, there are things in 2003 did better than in Brotherhood. I like Brotherhood, but I prefer 2003 better. And I'm not going to go through the entirety of Brotherhood saying that, oh, there was something wrong with this was wrong, I didn't like this, etc, etc. But instead, I'm going to go through the positives and the things 2003 did better than Brotherhood. And just to let you guys know, I'm not going to be showing any clips from the series or putting in music from the series because of copyright issues. I'm just going to be using stills. And also, I'm going to have to ask you guys to use your imaginations. But we'll get to that when we get to that. And hopefully you guys will understand what I'm trying to say. And so, let's get on with the video. Now the first thing I want to talk about that 2003 did better is Barry the Chopper. Now, what irritated me in Brotherhood is, if you saw the 2003 version of Barry the Chopper, you know what he's like. He was a psychopathic killer. This guy kidnapped Winry and scared Ed. What we saw in 2003, when Ed was trying to get away from Barry, it left you with a sense of helplessness. Like, Ed only had his one arm, and he was desperately trying to get away from Barry. And this was when he was human. As a human, Barry was scary and intimidating. And when his soul was put into a suit of armor, I think the scare factor in him was, taken away a little bit. But Barry was still a psycho, even when he was in a suit of armor. Well, his soul was in a suit of armor. He didn't care about anybody, he just wanted to kill people. But in Brotherhood, Barry was actually helping Roy Mustang. They took away the scare factor in Barry in Brotherhood. In 2003, he was a psychopath, but in 2009, he's helping the main cast? At the very least, in 2003, Barry actually scared you. He had build-up, and he was a complete psycho that wanted to kill anybody and everybody. But again, in Brotherhood, he was a killer and he was helping the main cast? I mean, really? I'm sorry, but Barry the Chopper in 2003 is a lot better than in Brotherhood. He was intimidating, scary, he was all about fantastic in 2003. So, that's number one. Let's move on to number two. Now, the next thing I want to talk about what 2003 did better is Ed and Al's determination to keep on going. Now listen, hear me out. I know in both versions that 2003 and Brotherhood, both versions of Ed and Al was determined to get their bodies back and determined to stop the homunculi and so on and so on. I get that. But if you used to watch 2003 from beginning all the way to the end, and you used to watch Brotherhood from beginning to end, like I did, I noticed something between the two. Well, in Brotherhood, everything seems to be going their way. It's almost like the world of Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood always seemed to be on their side. Well, do you guys remember those two chimeras who was out to get the Eric brothers? You know, those human-animal hybrid chimeras? Well, I remember this part of the anime where these two chimeras was after Ed, and these guys have been ordered to try and find him. And then, when Ed passed out, the two chimeras actually picked up Ed and helped him. And I'm like, hold on, isn't it these guys' job to take Ed and El back? I mean, these guys was just fighting him a few minutes ago, and now they're helping him? And there's all sorts of things in Brotherhood that I felt that the story was just going in Ed and El's favour. Now, when you compare it to 2003, I couldn't help but feel that it was the opposite in 2003. It felt like the old world was going against Ed and El. I can't help but feel that they suffered more in 2003 than they did in Brotherhood. Like the whole failed transmutation thing when they tried to bring back their mother. And yes, I know Brotherhood does that as well, but you saw exactly what they were going through in 2003. And Brotherhood kind of like, glances over it. There was also the loss of Nina, the loss of Hughes, Ed killing Greed, Ed trying to get away from Barry the Chopper, all trying to save Winry, Ed and Al being separated from Winry in the movie. In my honest opinion, I think that the Alric brothers went through a lot more hell in 2003 than they did in Brotherhood. I can't help but feel that they suffered more in 2003, like the world was against them. But when that was the case, when the world was against them, or Ed and Elle went through a traumatic experience, or they lost somebody, or when they come to a dead end of something, and all the stuff that happened to them, even when they went all through that in 2003, the most admirable thing that these two kids did is get back up and continue their journey. And yes, I know they did this in Brotherhood, but when it came to Brotherhood, everything just seems to be going their way. Like, coincidentally, Pride was losing his shell and he reverted back into a baby or something, and that's how Ed won. Or when Gluttony led Al to Father, so they know who the main bad guy is. Or when the Elric brothers and Score decide to work together. Or when Hohenheim, Ed and Al's dad, had this sort of reverse alchemy circle that can reverse Father's alchemy when he took in God's power. To me, it always felt that the story was always on their side. And yes, of course, they are the main characters, and at the end of the day, they have to win. What I'm trying to say is, in Brotherhood, I can't help but feel that they had it much more easier than they did in 2003. It's more admirable what they was going through in 2003. It was just one thing after another, after another, after another. But when life threw all this stuff at them, they got back up and continued, especially at their age. I can't help but feel that 2003 gave the Elric brothers more hardships than Brotherhood did. But again, they got back up and continued, even when life was giving them so much crap. And if you guys still don't know what I'm talking about, well, see it like this. Let's just say, for example, that you got two people. One guy was rich and one guy was poor. And the rich guy had everything handed to him and he barely did any work to get what he wanted. But the poor guy had to work really, really hard and teach himself and look after himself. And he worked hours and hours and hours every single day. And he worked really, really hard to get what he wanted. I'm basically saying that the poor guy is 2003 and Brotherhood is the rich guy. Now listen, I'm not saying that literally Brotherhood was easy on the main characters. I mean, it's just an example. All I'm saying is that the Elric brothers had to work twice as hard than they did in Brotherhood. And again, the world was against them, but they got up and continued on their journey despite all the horrible things that happened to them. And yes, again, don't get me wrong, Brotherhood does have this too. Ed and Al in Brotherhood did go through some horrible stuff too. But to me, I think in 2003, Ed and Al went through a lot more than they did in Brotherhood. That's my opinion anyways. So yeah, well it's done. Let's move on to the next one. And the next one is, the homunculi is a lot more interesting in 2003 than they are in Brotherhood. Now, there is a huge difference between 2003 and Brotherhood. In Brotherhood, the homunculi are the extracted sins of Father. Father wanted to rid himself of sin so he could be the perfect human. So yeah, basically, that's what the homunculi are in Brotherhood. Now, in 2003, the homunculi are failed human transmutations. They are the end result of humans trying to bring back the dead. And I'm not gonna lie, I absolutely loved the homunculi in 2003. Lust's character is fantastic, Wrath's character is fantastic, Envy's character is fantastic, Sloth's character is fantastic, and even though we see him for a little while, Greed's character was fantastic. All the homunculi in 2003 was fantastic. Lust's goal to become human is interesting, her interactions with Scar and the Elric brothers is interesting, and how she's tied to Scar's history, her goals, her story arc, her backstory. I think in my opinion that she's the best homunculi that has layers. I'm telling you guys, Lust in 2003 was fan-freaking-tastic. Each homunculi had their own goals, own past life, their own wants and own needs. I mean, come on, in my opinion, Sloth in 2003 is a lot more interesting than Sloth in Brotherhood. Sloth in 2003 is the creation of Ed and Al's attempt to bring their mother back, and they didn't figure this out until later. Wrath is the homunculi that was created by Azumi, Ed and Al's teacher. When her baby died, Azumi tried to bring her baby back by using a human transmutation, but it didn't work. And even his character is interesting. And there was Greed. Now, even though he was in the series for about, I don't know, about like 2 or 3 episodes, he left a big impact on Ed. Ed thought that the homunculi couldn't be killed by natural means. And when Greed wasn't immortal anymore, and Greed and Ed was fighting and Ed did a blow on Greed, Ed thought that Greed would just regenerate, but he didn't. Ed actually killed somebody, and before Greed died, he told Ed how to kill the homunculi. And again, when Ed found out that he actually killed Greed, Ed was traumatized by this. The fact that he took somebody's life. And Ed was traumatized by this and he was upset by this. In the end, Greed just wanted to be free and do whatever the hell he wanted. All the homunculi have their time to shine in the series, even Gluttony in the movie, where he became a huge monster. But in my opinion, I think Fuhrer Bradley, who was also an homunculus, I think he's both good in 2003 and in Brotherhood. I think he might actually be the most interesting homunculus in Brotherhood. Again, that's my opinion. But hey, 6 out of 7, am I right? So yeah, I think Fuhrer Bradley is actually more interesting in Brotherhood than he is in 2003. At the very least, I think so. And so, let's move on to the next one. And the next one is a big one. The animation. The animation is much better than it is in Brotherhood. I mean, look at this. You got Brotherhood here, and you've got the 2003 one here. Now for me, when I watched 2003, it always seems to have more detail in the background, while in Brotherhood it doesn't, as you can see from this picture. But okay, let me ask you guys something. If you look at these, you've got Ed reading a book in both versions. You got one in Brotherhood and in 2003, when he went to go and study at Tucker's house. And you know what, I'm just gonna say it. Brotherhood looks more cartoony than 2003 Fullmetal Alchemist is. Now listen, I know sometimes in both Brotherhood and 2003, they have their silly, cartoony moments. I get that, I understand that, but 2003 had more of a serious tone to it. I mean, let me ask you guys something. Let's just say, for example, that we switch the animation. Let's just say Brotherhood changed its animation with 2003. And let's just say, for example, that N and L went through all the stuff, like the tragic stuff that 2003 Ed and L went through, like losing their mom, losing Nina, the incident with Hughes, all the tragic, deep stuff that has ever happened in 2003, and the animation from Brotherhood was used instead of 2003. I mean, come on, it wouldn't feel the same. Okay, the Brotherhood animation is good in its own right, but if you ask me, I think 2003 has more detail to it. It felt more serious than Brotherhood. Brotherhood to me felt, too bouncy, too cartoony. I mean, come on, compare the human transmutation that Ed and L went through in Brotherhood and 2003. 2003 looks a lot more scarier. There's more detail to it than what there was in Brotherhood. Brotherhood felt more rounder, more moe anime-ish. I mean, yes, I know Fullmetal Alchemist is an anime, but Brotherhood felt too moe and a bit too cutesy. I mean, there were times when I thought it was just a little bit silly, like the time when Ed chased Alexander in Brotherhood. I mean, look at that, that's just silly. He looks like a guy in a dog costume. And yes, I know this was played up for laughs, but all in all, I just think that the 2003 animation is a lot better than Brotherhood. Brotherhood felt too light, but on the other hand, in Brotherhood, the animation suits it. I mean, this is just a personal preference, and you know what, I'm going to stick to it. I think the animation in 2003 is a lot better than it was in Brotherhood. But if you guys like the Brotherhood animation better, then good for you. I'm not knocking you guys if you like the Brotherhood animation. I just like the 2003 one better for its animation. So yeah, with that said and done, let's move on to the next one. The next one is going to be a little bit complicated, but I'll do my best to explain to the best of my abilities. Okay, you know, like in some anime where you have everything that works out in the end, and everybody got their just desserts, and everyone got their happy ending, and everybody got what they want? Well, you know, in Brotherhood, everybody got what they want. It's implied that Roy became Fuhrer, Scar took down the state to attack the Ishbalians, well, Scar's people. In the 2003 Fullmetal Alchemist movie, it's implied that Ed and Al didn't make it back to their world, so they didn't meet up with Winry or Roy, but in Brotherhood, Al got his body back, Ed got his arm back, and basically nearly all the good guys had their happily ever after, and it all ended in a nice little bow. But in 2003, I want to admit something. I actually prefer that none of the characters got what they wanted, and had that nice little bow at the end of the story. Wait, let me explain what I'm trying to say. Do you guys remember when I told you guys that it felt like the world was against Ed and Al? Like, it was like one thing after another, after another, after another, and they kept on getting back up and continued their journey. Well, I liked it how it didn't end perfectly for everybody, because in real life, life doesn't end with a perfect ending. Okay, let me give you an example. In Brotherhood, and in 2003, it was Envy who killed Hughes, Roy's best friend, and in Brotherhood, it was Roy who took down Envy. And you know what? You can't get any perfect than that Roy got revenge for the death of his friend by taking down the person who actually killed his best friend, which was Envy. But in 2003, Roy never found out who it was who killed Hughes, and Roy didn't take down Envy. Now, let's have a look at Scar. Scar's people in Brotherhood and 2003 were screwed over by the state, and in Brotherhood, it was Scar who took down Bradley, the very person who gave orders to attack Scar's people. And you have to admit that too is also a perfect fight, and Scar won. That, in my opinion, was perfect. But in 2003, Scar actually made a humongous giant transmutation circle and transformed everybody that was in the circle into a philosopher's stone. I mean, there could have been like loads of innocent soldiers in that transmutation circle, and Scar died, but he lived in Brotherhood. Scar didn't have that happy ending and got to live at the end. And again, in the 2003 movie of Fullmetal Alchemist, I think it was the Conqueror Shambhala. In that movie, Ed and Al goes on the other side of the gate, which is in our world, and they don't make it home. And also in that movie, it's been implied that Roy never became Führer, but in Brotherhood he did. And then there was Izumi, Ed and Al's teacher. In Brotherhood she lives, but in 2003, the Conqueror Shambhala, she's actually dead. And that's what I mean by chaos, as you can see on the screen here. Everything didn't end with a nice little bow at the end of it. Characters died, some characters didn't achieve their dreams, Ed and Al didn't make it home, characters didn't go down because of irony, and that's what I like about the 2003 than I do with Brotherhood. Because in real life, everything doesn't turn out in a poetic way. You're not going to get everything in life. You're not going to be able to achieve your dreams. You're not going to meet up with people ever again and get the happy ending that you've always wanted. And to me, 2003 seemed more realistic. But in Brotherhood, the story is giving you more comfort and more clarity and that happy ending in dreams that everybody always wanted. It's almost like Brotherhood is saying, you see, Roy did become Führer. Envy went down in a poetic way. The same with Bradley. And Ed, Al and Winry are reunited and have a happy family. Brotherhood had that feeling of, and they lived happily ever after, feel to it. Now, I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with that, but I like the realistic way that 2003 gave us. Even if you don't achieve your dreams, and the characters didn't go down the poetic way, and characters died, and you've never reunited with everybody, even though 2003 gives us that, I like how everybody continues on with their lives. I mean, who knows, maybe Roy might become Führer, and maybe one day Ed and Al will go through the gate again and meet up with Winry again. Now, some people will say that it's a downer for me to say, I think 2003's ending seems more dark and depressed. But like I said, of what I said about the series being against them, like it was one thing after another, after another, after another. And when life kept on throwing things at the Elric brothers, they still got back up and carried on. And that's what I like about 2003. You're not always going to get your way. You're not always going to achieve your dreams. You might not see loved ones again. For me, it just feels more realistic because life is chaos. And in 2003, it's also chaos. And barely anything ends with a poetic way. And if you guys still don't know what I'm talking about, please let me know in the comment section below and I'll try and explain it to you. Now, even though I do like Brotherhood's ending and its ironic endings for some characters, and some characters lived and everybody got what they wanted, I still like the 2003 when it comes to chaos. And so with that said, let's move on to the next one. Now, the next one, I know 2003 did better, and that is the pacing of the first half of the series. Now, this is an obvious one. In 2003 of Fullmetal Alchemist, 2003's Fullmetal Alchemist beat the first half of Brotherhood when it comes to its pacing. And yes, I know some of the episodes can be a little bit fillerish, and some episodes are filler. Some of the episodes, like one or two of them. Anyways, I did not like the pacing in Brotherhood. Well, the beginning of Brotherhood anyways. 2003 Fullmetal Alchemist had the best first episode, and from the beginning of the episode, as the series went on, we got to know personally who Ed and Al's mom is, and we got to see how close Ed and Al was with their mom, and we see how it all began, with them trying to bring back their mother by using forbidden alchemy. We had the introduction to Roy, and we got to see Ed and Al's journey of them wanting to become state alchemists so they can find a way to get their bodies back. And alongside their journey, we had world building, characters who had their own problems, and most importantly, other characters that will be in the series long term, and how they had an impact on Ed and Al, Ed and Al's relationship with Winry, Roy, and the other soldiers, and events that impacted Ed and Al. I'm telling you guys now, the pacing in 2003 beats Brotherhood, because here's the thing, the beginning of a story is very, very important, and if you guys ask me, the pacing in the first half of 2003 Fullmetal Alchemist was perfect. We got to laugh, cry, and fall in love with these characters along Ed and Al's journey. The more time we spent with these characters, you know, the side characters, the more you want to be with them. And 2003 had fantastic pacing, but Brotherhood had terrible pacing. In the first episode of Fullmetal Alchemist, or was it the second episode? Anyways, when we first saw those few episodes, we didn't get an opening like we did in 2003. It felt like Brotherhood was just chucking us into the story and trying to get us past the first half of 2003. In the first episode, it's almost like it's trying to say, hey guys, look, here's Roy Mustang, and oh look, there's Hughes, and everybody else. The entire gang is back in this new series of Fullmetal Alchemist. And then we get this backstory when Ed and Al try to bring back their mother, and it says something along the lines of, oh, their mom got sick and she died, and there was that old thing with Nina and Hughes, but I'll get to that later. It was like Brotherhood was trying to get past all those things that we saw in 2003 and get straight to the part where the manga ended, because the anime caught up to the manga, and then it started with its pacing in Brotherhood. I'm sorry, but 2003's pacing was a hell of a lot better than it was in Brotherhood. I don't understand why they didn't give Brotherhood the pacing like they gave 2003 at the beginning, because I'm going to tell you guys something. If they gave the pacing in Brotherhood in the beginning of the series like they did in 2003, like they took it slowly, the story showed how the brothers got where they are, what their relationship was with everybody, the introduction to Roy and Hughes, and we got to spend more time with these characters, and Ed and Al's journey. If the pacing in 2003 was put into Brotherhood at the beginning, then Brotherhood would have been an excellent series. I mean, yeah, Brotherhood is an excellent series, but I would have loved it more if it didn't rush through the first half of Brotherhood. I mean, it's like Brotherhood is saying, okay, we know you've seen that part with Nina, we know you saw that part with Hughes, we know you've seen that part where Winry got a letter from the military about the death of her parents, we've seen the relationship between Ed, Elle and their mom, and where it led to, we saw their journey, how Ed became a state alchemist. We know you guys have seen that, so we're just going to skip it, or rush through it, so we can get back on track of what's happening in the manga. Again, I did not like this. They should have started nice and slow like they did in 2003, and do like they did in 2003 into Brotherhood. And even though we know who was going to die and what sort of events would impact Ed and Al, even though we knew what was coming in the first half of the manga, I still would have watched Brotherhood if it was nice and slow, and we got to see the beginning of Ed and Al's journey and their relationships and so on and so on. So yeah, the pacing in 2003 is a lot better than it was in Brotherhood in the beginning. I just hate how they rushed through the beginning of Brotherhood. So yeah, that's all I gotta say about that. Let's move on to the next one. I loved how mature 2003 was compared to Brotherhood. Okay, let me explain something. In Brotherhood, I couldn't help but feel that they were talking down to us, like they were lecturing us. Okay, let me give you guys a few examples. You know when Ed and Al found out that Hughes died, and Ed and Al went to see his wife, and Hughes' wife said, oh, you don't need to feel bad, Hughes did it all for you, he was doing his job, and he died on duty. I mean, it's almost like the characters are trying to reassure the audience Hughes would want. And also, there was that one time in Brotherhood where Ed and Al finally caught Scar, and Winry confronted Scar, and Winry decided to help Scar. And the reason why she was helping him is because Winry said that her parents were doctors and they would have wanted me to help you. And even though Winry is against Scar killing people, she also refused to kill Scar. And when it came to this point in Brotherhood, I couldn't help but feel that this was another lecture. It was almost like the series is trying to say, hey listen, you shouldn't take revenge. Killing people won't bring back the dead. For me, it almost feels like the series is lecturing us instead of talking to us. And even though sometimes 2003 will give us some dialogue there and there, 2003 doesn't talk down to us and lecture us like it did in that two moments that I mentioned, the one with Hughes' wife and Winry and Scar. 2003 was talking to us, not talking down to us, if you know what I'm trying to say. I mean, most anime today actually does this, telling us, oh, we shouldn't do this and we shouldn't do that. This is how you're supposed to react. This is how you're supposed to behave. Do this if this happens to you. And most anime today feels like that. And that's what I felt in Brotherhood. Brotherhood at some points felt like it was lecturing me, but 2003 didn't feel like it was lecturing me, but instead it was talking to me, if you know what I'm trying to say. So yeah, with that said, let's move on to the next one. Now, this one is a big one. The death of Nina, and the events before and after that event. Now, here's the thing. I know for a fact that we had about like 2 or 3, I think it was 2 episodes of Nina being on screen, but Ed and Al has spent a year at Tucker's house, which means Ed and Al has spent time with Nina a whole year too. Ed and Al was at Tucker's house because he was trying to study for the alchemist exam. So yeah, Ed and Al spent a lot of time with Nina, and I think it was like episode 6 where Ed and Al had to help Hughes' wife give birth, and Nina was there with Ed and Al, and they was having a good time eating cake. And in the next episode, we are told that Tucker's last chimera that he made, which by the way, Tucker is a state alchemist, and he was given benefits because he created a chimera that could talk. And we the audience have been told that Tucker's wife left him, and then later on, we see Ed and Al talk with somebody, I can't remember who it was, but we see them talk about the chimera that Tucker made 2 years ago. And I can't remember who it was, but I think it was either Ed or Al who said, oh yeah, what did the chimera said? And someone said, the only thing it said was, I want to die. And later on, or it could have been like earlier on, I can't remember, I'm going off of memory here. But anyways, Tucker's orientation is coming up, and if he doesn't present the state of what he's been researching on, he and Nina will be kicked out of their house. So, after hearing what happened to Nina's mom, that she supposedly left Tucker, and the chimera that Tucker made 2 years ago said it wants to die, we the audience had this inkly feeling something was up. And then, when we saw that scene with Nina, her dad, and Alexander, and Tucker was sitting at a desk, or I think it was a couch or something, and Tucker didn't know what to do. He gave Nina a hug, and then it fades to black. And then we saw rain clouds above the Tucker estate, and Ed and Al was trying to find Tucker and Nina in the house. And at this point, when we saw Ed with a worried look on his face, we the audience also had that feeling as well. We had an idea what was coming next, and then Ed and Al finds Tucker in the basement, and we see Tucker with a new chimera that he created. Now, in Brotherhood, Ed and Al were surprised and happy for Tucker that he created a chimera. But in 2003, Alphonse was happy for Tucker because he created a chimera, so now Tucker wouldn't be thrown out. But Ed knew something was up. Ed put all the pieces together. What happened to Tucker's wife, that one sentence that the chimera said 2 years ago, I want to die, and we had that eerie lighting in the basement. For me, this was absolutely perfect in 2003. Ed and Al is going to be much more upset over what happened to Nina than they would in Brotherhood. It was more upsetting in 2003 because we got to know Nina. Ed and Al spent time with her for a year, and then later on, Tucker gets arrested, Nina is taken away, but Ed tried to stop him from taking her away, and then Ed and Al finds the bloody mess of Nina, and this leaves a huge impact on Ed and Al. When Ed cried, we all cried because of what happened to Nina. Hell, at the end of the episode, in the credits, we see Ed with a different face expression and a flash of Nina and Alexander, and then later on, Roy gives Ed and Al a lecture about you can't bring back the dead, you need to move on, etc, etc. And for a long time, this affected Ed and Al. And then, when Ed found out that Scar was the one who killed Nina, Ed was happy about this news, and he went to go and try and find Scar. I'm sorry, but again, 2003 did a better job with the Nina story than what Brotherhood ever could or do. The animation was absolutely stunning, the dread and despair was unbelievable, and when Ed cried, we all cried. And again, it left an impact on Ed and Al, but in Brotherhood, they just rushed through it in just one episode. Again, 2003 did it a lot better. There was more emotion, more dread. It was much better than it was in Brotherhood. And so, with that said, let's move on to the next one. And the next one is Maes Hughes. Again, just like Nina, Maes Hughes was also rushed. Now, in 2003, we got to know Hughes. He was kind, he was funny, he helped out Roy, tried to become Führer, and also he tried to help Ed and Al. He's a good father and a good husband, and Maes Hughes was brave. I'm sorry, but Maes Hughes was a fantastic, great character. Everybody loved Hughes, not just other characters, but the audience too. And when he was killed and he was being buried, not only did other characters cry, but we all cried that day. And when it came to Maes Hughes' death, there was a few things that I did like. Number one, in Brotherhood, after when Ed and Al found out that Hughes died, Ed felt guilty, so Ed and Al decided to go and visit Maes Hughes' wife, and they wanted to apologise to her, saying it's all their fault, they were helping Ed and Al, etc, etc. I mean, that scene was all well and all, but I like the fact that Ed and Al didn't know that Maes Hughes was killed. It was roughly around 20 episodes when they found out, and they never had that talk with Maes Hughes' wife in 2003 like they did in Brotherhood. Now the reason why I like this is because, again, it's chaos. Things don't always work out in your favour. Number 2, Mustang didn't find out that it was Envy who killed Hughes. Now in Brotherhood, Mustang did find out that it was Envy who killed Hughes, and I'm going to tell you something. Roy was not pleased with Envy at all. I mean, obviously he would be angry with Envy for killing Hughes, but I like the fact that Roy didn't find out that it was Envy who killed Hughes, but instead Roy went after the higher-ups in the military who probably orchestrated the death of Hughes. Again, in 2003, Roy didn't know it was Envy that killed Maes Hughes. But you know what? If we spent more time with Hughes in Brotherhood like we did in 2003, and it was 2003 Envy in Brotherhood, because Envy in 2003 seems more of a psychopath. Brotherhood Envy seems a bit too light if you ask me. But again, if we spent more time with Hughes like we did in 2003 in Brotherhood, and we had 2003 Envy in Brotherhood, it would be a lot more satisfying when Roy toasted Envy in Brotherhood. But anyways, yes, I'm going off track. Again, things don't always go your way, and you don't get that satisfying ending. I mean, in Brotherhood, Roy got revenge on Envy, but in 2003, he didn't. Now, let's talk about the next thing. The next thing is when Ed, Al, and Winry was on the train, and they was talking about Maes Hughes and his family, and how they made Ed and Al's snack. And when they was on the train, Ed saw Hughes on the platform, waving at him, and Ed was like, oh come on, it couldn't be. He's all the way back in Central. And again, Ed and Al and Winry didn't know about Hughes' death, and that was also another part that was really upsetting. They didn't know that their friend was dead, and Maes Hughes' spirit gave Ed a wave goodbye. I'm telling you guys, that was the peak of sadness when it came to Maes Hughes' death. I mean, yeah, throughout the entire episode of where Hughes died in 2003 was saddening, but when Hughes' spirit waved goodbye to Ed, that was just the cherry on top. That was peak sadness for Hughes. Hell, the ending credits of the episode where Maes Hughes died in 2003 wasn't the regular credits that we saw for all the other episodes in the series. It was just credits of people's names going up. It was kind of similar to the episode where Nina died, except in that case, Ed sort of added like a sort of like grin to him, or a sort of like sad grin or something like that. But in the episode where Maes Hughes died, we didn't have the regular credits that we normally have. Maes Hughes was in the series of 2003 than he was in Brotherhood. In 2003, we got to know Maes Hughes on a personal level. Him doing his job, helping Roy Mustang to become Führer, helping Ed and Al. Hell, Maes Hughes and his wife held a birthday party for Ed and Al. And Ed and Al has known Hughes for about 4 years. That's longer than what Ed and Al knew Nina and Alexander. So Maes Hughes did care about the boys. Hell, Ed and Al delivered Maes Hughes' baby, while Maes was out to get the doctor. So Ed and Al and Maes Hughes was close. In fact, Maes Hughes was close with everybody. He was a good family man, a good friend, he was funny, he was deep. We got to know who Maes Hughes was in 2003 than we did in Brotherhood. And again, if all these things was in Brotherhood, of what we knew about Maes Hughes in 2003, and the same with Nina, it would have made Brotherhood so much better. But in Brotherhood, we never got the build-up as to where the brothers came from, their meetings with certain people, their relationship with Nina, their relationship with Maes Hughes. It's almost like Brotherhood is banking on us and hoping from us that we've watched 2003. So that way they'll think, okay, everybody knows what happened in the beginning of Fullmetal Alchemist in 2003, so let's just skip all these parts and just get to the point of where the manga left off. And that's what I don't like about Brotherhood. Okay, let's change a few characters there, let's skip a few things there, let's rush through this here. We know all about Nina and Hughes there. I'm sorry, but if Brotherhood did exactly what 2003 did at the beginning, slowly introducing us to characters, we getting to know the characters, showing us what their relationships with everybody was, etc, 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 then Brotherhood would have been much more powerful. I mean, let me ask you guys something. Let's just say, for example, that we took all the things that we knew about Maes Hughes from 2003, his relationships, his flashbacks, his stories, etc, etc, everything that we saw of Maes Hughes, up to the point when we saw him on the train platform waving at Ed and Al. Well, his spirit was waving at him anyways. And then we took Envy from 2003, which is a complete and utter psychopath, and then he was the one who confronted Roy and told him that he was the one who killed Maes Hughes. I'm telling you guys, it would have been so much satisfying to see Roy take down Envy than what it did in Brotherhood. I know I already said that, but it's true if you think about it. Brotherhood expects us to know these characters in the first episode, or the second or third. Like, oh look, there's Maes Hughes, oh look, there's Roy, oh look, there's Ed and Al, oh look. I mean, that's just the way I felt about Brotherhood in its beginning anyways. But I'll get back to this in a little bit. I want to talk about the last thing that I think 2003 did better than in Brotherhood. And that was Winry finding out that it was Roy Mustang who killed her parents instead of Scar. And you know what? I find this a lot better in 2003 than in Brotherhood. Now, in both series, both Winry's parents were doctors, and they was helping people, both the military and Scar's people. Now, when it came to Brotherhood, it was Scar who killed Winry's parents, and Scar has gone through a lot of trauma. The loss of his brother, the loss of his people, getting hurt in the process, and Scar was in a bed when he woke up. And Scar remembers the blonde hair and blue eyes of the military. And when he woke up, he saw Winry's parents, and they had blonde hair and blue eyes, and he saw them as the enemy. And in a fit of rage, he killed both of them. And then Scar ran off. Just to let you guys know, I'm going through this series by memory, and a few clips on YouTube. Anyways, when Ed became a state alchemist, and Ed and Al was on their journey, trying to find the Philosopher's Stone, and Ed's job from being a military man, or a state alchemist, it was somewhere around this time. I can't remember exactly where, but Scar was going around trying to kill state alchemists in an act of revenge of what the military did to Scar's people. And I'm sure Scar was killing a few people that was in the military that wasn't state alchemists, but you know what I'm trying to say. Anyways, Scar knew about Ed and Al, knowing that they were state alchemists, and even though they were children, Scar didn't care, because if you started with the military, then you are the enemy. Now, I can't remember exactly how many times Scar fought against Ed and Al. I think it was about like 3 times in Brotherhood. If I'm wrong, please let me know in the comment sections below. But I think it was the second fight between Ed, Al and Scar was fighting, and then Winry comes face to face with Scar, and she finds out that it was Scar who killed her parents. And Winry grabs a gun, and Winry comes face to face with Scar, and Scar finds out that Winry is the child of the doctors that he killed, and Winry is pointing a gun to Scar, and Winry is crying. She comes face to face with her parents' killer. She comes face to face with the person that killed her parents, the person that she hated for a very long time. Now, let's get some context into this. 1. Winry lost her parents thanks to Scar, the same parents who tried to help Scar. 2. Scar's been killing state alchemists in an act of revenge. So yeah, Scar's got blood in his hands. And 3. He's trying to kill Ed and Al. Now, if there's any other things that Scar has done, like bad things, please let me know in the comments below, because I've forgotten. Now, up to this point, when Winry found out that it was Scar who not only killed loads of state alchemists, not only did he kill Winry's parents, but he is also trying to kill Ed and Al, the 2 people that she loves more than anything in the world. And when she points a gun at him, and Scar hears that the doctors that was Winry's parents, Scar says something along the lines of, "If you point that gun at me, I will consider you an enemy." And the 4th thing, he threatens her life. And Winry's cry, OMG, Winry's cry when she finds out that Scar was the one who killed her parents, it freaking hurt. Now, that whole part wasn't the problem. I love the part when Winry first meets Scar and knows that he's the one who's been killing state alchemists, and knowing that he'll also be going after Ed and Al, the 2 people that she loves more than anything in this world. And then when she comes face to face with Scar, and Ed spews out that it was Scar that killed Winry's parents, and then one thing led to another, Scar escapes, and then Winry starts crying. And I'm telling you guys something, it was really heartbreaking to hear Winry cry. All that time, ever since she was a kid, she's hated the person who killed her parents, and now she wants to kill Scar. And Ed and Al has been saying, "Oh, don't shoot Winry, don't shoot." But let me ask you guys something. Let's just say, for example, that you guys went through as to what Winry went through. She lost her parents, and now the same guy wants to kill the 2 people that you love. And he also wants to kill other people. And you had a gun pointing at the person that has killed the people you love, wants to kill the people you love, and killed other people as well. What would you do at the point? So of course you're going to pull the trigger. For me, it feels more realistic that way. And again, I'm not saying that this part where Winry finally meets the person that killed her parents and wanted to kill Ed and Al, and Winry started crying, I mean, that part was superb. I mean, not the fact that Winry was crying, but even though I do love this part where Winry finally meets the man who killed her parents, and then later Winry started crying, I couldn't help but feel that they were being too preachy when Ed said, "These hands were made for saving people, not taking lives," or something like that. I mean, you guys can disagree with me if you want, but it seems to me that they were being a little bit preachy. I mean, you guys can understand that, right? In a lot of media, you have like one of the main characters say, "Oh, revenge is wrong, don't be a bully, be more open-minded, respect nature," you know, that sort of thing. It was this moment, and another moment what I'm going to get to in a second, is where I feel that the episode was trying to get across to the audience, or trying to teach the audience, that revenge is wrong, don't take a life, I mean, yes, I know for a fact that Ed was telling Winry these lessons, like don't take a life, these hands were made for saving people, etc, etc. And I'm gonna get to the big problem, and that was when Ed and Al finally caught Scar, and Winry came face to face with Scar again. I forgot to mention that there's a three-way party here, and the three-way party is Winry, Scar, and the audience. We the audience know what Winry's been through, and we also know what Scar's been through. We all know that Scar isn't a bad person, and he has done some good things. And we all know that Winry is a good person, but the thing is, both Scar and Winry don't know exactly what the other has been through, like their journey, their flashbacks. I mean, yeah, sure, don't get me wrong. Winry and Scar will know each other, either from the stories that they heard from other people, or understand from mutual pain, you know, through empathy or sympathy. In the beginning, when Scar and Winry saw each other, Winry wanted to kill Scar, and Scar says, "If you attempt to shoot me, I will see you as an enemy." And then when Scar escaped, and then when Winry and Scar met again, Scar says, "You have every right to judge me." But instead of killing Scar, Winry decided to help Scar by bandaging him up. And Winry said something along the lines of, "My parents were doctors. They would have wanted me to do this. There must be a reason as to why they helped Scar." And I know I said this before, but Scar says, "Does that mean you forgive me?" And when Winry says, "Oh, don't get me wrong, I don't condone you wanting murder." I know I already said that, but when it came to this part, and alongside the part where Scar was talking to Miles, a fellow is Spalin or something, Scar and Miles started talking about how Miles became part of the military in order to change it from the inside, and how Scar decided to destroy it from the outside. I believe it was episode 39. I mean, all this part felt very, very preachy. Again, I know they're trying to get this across to the audience, but that's how I feel when they was talking. Don't give in to hatred, don't get revenge, etc, etc. Now, when Scar was caught and he was trapped, and Scar came face to face with Winry, instead of shouting at him or killing him, Winry actually bandaged Scar up. And Scar said something along the lines of, "Does that mean you forgive me?" And then Winry says, "Oh, don't get me wrong, I'm against your hate and murdering, but my parents wouldn't want me to kill you. They were doctors, and they would have wanted me to help people, including you." Again guys, I'm going off of memory here, but it was something like that. Now, when it came to this part, and the part where Ed said to Winry that your hands were made to save people, for me it just felt really, really preachy. Almost forced, if you will. It's almost like it's telling the audience to not give in to hate and help people instead, which, that's a good lesson and all, but for me it just doesn't seem natural. I mean, who talks like this in real life? And we need to remember that the series, as a whole in general, is trying to teach us lessons instead of actually talking to us. Like, don't get revenge, don't do this, don't do that. This is how you're supposed to react, this is how you're supposed to behave, this is how things work. You're supposed to act in this manner, in this situation. I've always felt that in some anime, where it's trying to say, oh, you've got to do this, you've got to do that, this is how you're supposed to react, this is how you're supposed to behave, you know, etc, etc. For me, it just didn't feel natural when it came to Winry and Scar. I mean, we the audience know what Scar's been through, and he's not really all that bad of a guy. He's been through some trauma too, etc, etc. But Winry doesn't know Scar. She doesn't 100% know his history, or anything like that. He's just the guy who killed her parents. And she doesn't know what Scar's been through. But we the audience know what Scar's been through. So we the audience kind of feel sorry for Scar because of what he's been through. And not only that, it was Scar who killed Nina in both versions of Brotherhood and 2003. So Ed kind of wants to get revenge for Nina for what Scar did in Brotherhood. But anyways, I'm getting off track. Now, when it came to Winry and Roy in 2003, for me, it felt more natural when it came to Roy and Winry. I didn't feel that 2003 was talking down to us or trying to give us lessons. Like, oh, you shouldn't do this, you shouldn't do that, you know, that sort of thing, when it came to Brotherhood. But in 2003, I didn't feel any of that. Because, unlike Scar, Roy's case when it came to Roy killing Winry's parents, there was some complications. When Winry was told by two boys that it was an alchemist who wielded flames that was responsible for Winry's parents' death, and at this point, Winry knew they were talking about Roy Mustang. He was the one who killed Winry's parents. And when she figured this out, Winry decided to go back to Central, and I'm not really sure what she would have done, but since Roy is back in the capital, she might actually get revenge on him. So she tells Ed and Al that she's going to go and stay with Maes Hughes and his family, and then she gets onto the train with Hawkeye. Now, before I go any further, let's talk about Roy Mustang. What do we know about him? And obviously I'm talking about 2003 Mustang. Now I'm talking about this moment in time, the exact same time when Winry found out that it was Mustang who killed her parents. Up to this point, what do we know about Mustang? Well, he can be funny, even though he can be harsh at times. Roy is harsh in a realistic way. Like, he tries to get through Ed and Al that you can't bring back the dead, you need to move on and continue to live. Roy is a realist. He knows what he needs to do, and he knows what other people need to hear. But he's not at all a bad person at all. He's a good leader. He was good friends with Maes Hughes, and obviously Roy was the one who killed Winry's parents. But after when Roy killed Winry's parents, Roy absolutely hated himself for what he did to those doctors. And Roy even thought of committing suicide for what he did to those doctors and for what he did to Scott's people. But Roy decided to carry on living and decides that he wants to be free one day so he can change the military so none of this would happen ever again. That's what Roy wanted to do. And we know he feels guilty of what he's done. So he's really not a bad man. But Winry doesn't know about how Roy feels. And she doesn't know about his plans, about how he wants to be free so he can change the military so none of this will ever happen again. But she doesn't know this. And also there's another character called Shisaka. You know, the bookworm that was at the library? The girl could remember all the books that was at the National Library. Well, here's the thing. When Maes Hughes died and Roy Mustang decided to close the case, Shisaka didn't like this and she was upset with Roy. She thought, in her perspective, Roy didn't care about Hughes. Hell, she even gave Roy Mustang evidence. And this is one of the parts that I like. In her perspective, she thinks that Roy doesn't care about Hughes' death. But we, the audience, know that Roy does care about Hughes. Roy wanted to keep it under wraps and make it look like that he gave up on the case of Maes Hughes. Shisaka thinks Roy doesn't care. Roy is keeping it under wraps, and she has the wrong idea. And it's the same with the audience. We know that Roy's trying to keep it under wraps, so the higher-ups will just leave him alone. I mean, we, the audience, and Roy Mustang know that he's just playing along, but she doesn't know that. It's just a misunderstanding, and this will come into play later on. Now, if you're a Fullmetal Alchemist fan, you guys obviously know what Roy Mustang is like by the time when Winry was on the train, on her way to see Maes Hughes. And I don't think Winry really needs a introduction, so let's talk about Winry from the time she knew that Roy killed her parents to when Winry and Roy came to an understanding. Now, Winry knows that Roy has been helping Ed and Elle for a long time, up to this point when she got on the train with Hawkeye. And I think Winry kind of knows that Hawkeye and Roy are kind of close, I think. Anyways, Hawkeye and Winry is on the train, and they get into a conversation, and Winry asked if they knew any doctors called the Rock Bells, and Hawkeye says yes, and Hawkeye says, I don't know what you know, but no matter what the order is, a soldier has to follow orders, no matter how absurd it is. And even Hawkeye says that she herself doesn't like the military, but she's in the military of her own free will, and even though she has to take orders, there is one thing that she can do without anybody ever giving her any orders on one thing, and that is to protect somebody that she cares about, which is employing Roy. And Winry asks, what if that person isn't worthy of protecting? And Hawkeye says, that's for me to decide. And when we cut back to Winry, she has this kind of serious look on her face. Now the thing is, I don't know what Winry is thinking, but she might be thinking, why would Hawkeye protect somebody like Roy? So, number one, Roy Mustang has helped Ed and Elle for a long time. And number two, Hawkeye wants to protect Roy. And Winry sort of knows that Hawkeye is a good person. And Hawkeye herself said that she doesn't like the military, but she's in the military in order to protect Roy. So far, that's two things that Winry has to think about. Now at this point, I don't really think it would be enough for Winry to back off from wanting to get revenge on Roy. I mean, Winry might have some ideas of wanting to kill Roy when she gets back to the capital, but the thing is, I don't know. But at the very least, it gives something for Winry to think about. And then, the big thing that shook Winry to her core, and that was when Winry found out that Maes Hughes was killed. Now, Winry knew Maes, and Winry knew his daughter and his wife. And also, I think it's assumed that Winry also knew that it was Edward and Elle who delivered Maes Hughes' baby. So, Ed, Elle, Maes Hughes, and his family are really close with each other. And Winry knew that Maes Hughes was a good man, he was a good father, he was a good husband, and he's been helping Ed and Elle for a long time. And Winry knew this. At the very least, I think so anyways. And after, when Winry was told that Hughes was killed, she was also told by Maes Hughes' wife. And yes, I know she's got a name, but I forgot. Anyways, she told Winry that Maes was going to help Roy Mustang get all the way to the top. That he was going to help Roy become Führer. And after this was the part where Winry was completely conflicted. Again, she knew that Maes Hughes was a good man, and his family was good people, and Hughes was helping Ed and Elle for years. And now, at this point, she finds out that Maes Hughes and Roy Mustang are good friends, and he wanted to help Roy get to the position of Führer. For a long time, Winry has hated the person who killed her parents, and after taking all this in and considering what Roy has done for Ed and Elle and there are people out there who wanted to help him and protect him and help him get through the ranks to become Führer, and the things that he's done for Ed and Al. Winry started crying at this point, and of course Winry was upset because Maes Hughes died, but she was also upset because of the situation that she's in. I know I've said this 2 times, but Roy Mustang has helped the Elric brothers. There are people who wants to protect Roy, which is Orkai, and Maes Hughes is the best friend of Roy Mustang, and he wanted to help Roy get to the position of Führer. There is a major, and I mean major conflict within Winry, and she doesn't know what to do anymore. And in the next episode, Roy goes to see Maes Hughes' wife and daughter for a visit. Her name is Gracia, by the way. Gracia offers Roy some tea, and just before he was about to go into the house, he sees Winry in the window, and Winry is just glaring at him. And then Roy says to Gracia, "No, I've got too much work to do, but thanks anyways." So yeah, it was hard for Roy to come face to face with Winry. I don't think he knows that she knows that he killed Winry's parents, but nevertheless, he still couldn't bring himself to come face to face with her. Winry, I mean. And then much later into the series, Winry meets up with Ed and Al's dad, and she has a chat with him, and she talks about Roy, and she tells him that her parents were killed by somebody that wasn't a bad person, and that person is also somebody that she respects, which obviously she's talking about Roy Mustang. At this point, Winry is trapped. We all know that Roy Mustang isn't a psychopath or a bad person, and he's done so much for Ed and Al, and there are people out there that she respects that wants to help Roy, so she doesn't know what to do. And later on in the same episode, Winry and Shizuka goes to try and fight Ed and Al, but she runs into Roy Mustang and his group. And Roy Mustang and his group is trying to find Ed and Al. Now, we the audience and Winry and Shizuka and Ed and Al thinks that Roy Mustang and his group is going to go and arrest Ed and Al for deserting the military. Again, it's going to that we know, they know, but this person doesn't know situations, like I said earlier. Ed and Al thinks that Roy and his group wants to arrest them for leaving. Winry, Shizuka, and the audience thinks they're going to do that too. Now, we see Shizuka and Winry captured by Roy Mustang and his group, and they're tied up and they're walking with Roy's group. And Winry starts questioning Roy, or Orkai, saying something along the lines of, "Do you really think that those two are rebels?" And she also says, "You're the one who recruited Ed and Al, aren't you? And now this." And Shizuka says, "It's no use, Winry. All this man ever cares about is getting up in the ranks of the military." Again, this is just all a big massive misunderstanding. Shizuka didn't think that Roy cared about Maes Hughes, and when Shizuka said this, I think this actually made Winry think back to when Gracia said that Maes wanted to help Roy get up into the ranks to help him become Führer. Now, from their perspective, Shizuka and Winry, they just assume that Roy just wants to become Führer, and that's all he's ever been after. Maybe at this point Winry thought that Roy was just using Ed and Al, and maybe to some extent Hughes. I mean, yeah, we the audience know that's not true, but from Shizuka and Winry's point of view, this is probably what they were thinking. And then Winry said, "Answer me, was this how it was when you killed my mother and father too?" And Roy doesn't say anything. And then when Roy was fighting against Ed and Al, Winry begged Roy to stop attacking them. Winry doesn't want to see Ed and Al be killed by Roy. She's already lost her mom and dad, and she doesn't want to lose Ed and Al too. She doesn't want to see Roy kill Ed and Al. Now, Ed and Al, Winry, Shizuka, and the audience assume that Roy wants to take in Ed and Al as war criminals, or Roy has to take them down. This is what Ed and Al, Winry, and Shizuka has been thinking. And Winry doesn't want to see Ed and Al be taken down, and the only thing that she can do is just beg for Roy to stop. And it comes to this point of the story where it felt more believable than it did with Brotherhood. You had Winry and Scar in Brotherhood, and you got 2003 with Roy and Winry. It's at this part that is more believable, and it is this. Roy stops the fight, and he tells Ed and Al, "Why didn't you come to me for help? I would have helped you." So Ed, Al, Shizuka, and Winry now knows that Roy wasn't coming after him because he was ordered to. He came looking for him to help them, and Roy finally tells Ed, Al, Winry, and Shizuka the truth of what he did to Winry's parents. Roy was ordered to kill Winry's parents because they was helping Scar's people. Well, technically they was helping both soldiers and Scar's people, and the military told the Rock Bells to stop, but they wouldn't listen. So Roy was ordered to kill the Rock Bells. And for what we, the audience, seen in the flashback, Roy was going to kill himself, and he doesn't outright say this to anybody, that he was going to kill himself, but Roy said to the brothers and Winry that he would never follow unreasonable orders ever again, like he did with Winry's parents. Roy also says that he wants to put himself in a position where he wouldn't have to follow those orders, and it's at this point where Winry and Shizuka finally understands. She understood why Roy wanted to become Führer. It was Winry's parents that gave Roy the motivation of wanting to change things within the military. So none of the atrocities, like the war with Scar's people and Roy killing Winry's parents, will never happen ever again. And so, up to this point, when Roy said all of this, from helping Ed and Al, having people who wants to protect him, having a best friend like Maes Hughes, and wanting to help him become Fuhrer, and now hunting down Ed and Al to ask them why they didn't come to him for protection, which surprises Winry, Shizuka, Ed and Al, and he tells the story of what he did to Winry's parents and saying that he wanted to rise up into the ranks, so nothing like what he did, I think it was the Ishbalan War, and killing Winry's parents will never happen ever again. And after hearing all this, Winry finally understands. Winry at this point understands Roy, and yes, I know she's not going to forgive Roy, but she knew that he was following orders and he didn't want to do it, and he wanted to become Fuhrer so no atrocities will ever happen ever again. This gives Winry more context, and it gives her all the pieces of the puzzle of who Roy Mustang is, why he did it, why he's doing it, and why he wants change. And it finally hits Winry. But I'm still not done. In the movie The Conqueror of Shambhala, I can't remember which one it was. I think Roy either quit the military or he went into isolation or something. But Roy looks like he's given up on being a military man. I think it was because Ed was dead or something else made him not push forward to become Fuhrer. But when Winry saw him again, she told Roy to remember the promise that she made. And she also said that Ed is alive. And this gave Roy Mustang the push to continue of trying to become Fuhrer once again. I can't remember exactly what made Roy stop becoming a military man or he stopped pushing to become Fuhrer, but Winry told Mustang that he had to continue. That's what he promised her a few years ago. And as Mustang walks into battle, Winry glares at his back, and even though Winry hasn't forgiven Roy, Winry has learned to move forward, and at this point she knows that Roy will try to make it up into the ranks to become Fuhrer. Now this was just an add-on from the movies where she tells Roy to get up and continue and don't let my parents' deaths be in vain. But the part where he tells Ed, Al, Winry and Shizuka of what he did and what he wants to do to change things, this part without a doubt is, and I mean is, a lot better than it was in Brotherhood with Winry and Scar. With Winry and Scar, it didn't feel believable and it felt very preachy. But 2003, you actually see the characters interact with each other. They come face to face saying what they did and what they want to do to change things. But with Brotherhood, it's telling the audience to take the high ground, don't take revenge, and be the better man. But 2003 doesn't do that because the characters are getting across how they feel, what they did, and what they want to change things to not only the audience but other characters as well. And again, I'm sorry, but 2003, where it was Winry and Mustang, was a lot better than it was with Scar and Winry. But if you guys think otherwise, please let me know in the comment sections below. Now before I go, there's just one more thing I just want to say. Yes, I do love 2003 Fullmetal Alchemist more. I'm not going to deny that. For me, Brotherhood seems more sillier, more cartoony, more light-hearted. Brotherhood feels more poetic. And the fact that everybody was facing off against a god was just impressive. Brotherhood has its good moments. And listen, I'm not a Brotherhood hater, I promise you guys that. But in my opinion, I think 2003 and Brotherhood need each other. I always saw 2003 Fullmetal Alchemist and Brotherhood like Ed and Al. Like 2003 was Ed and Brotherhood was Al. Ed and 2003 is the more serious one, and Al and Brotherhood was more light-hearted and silly. And I know some people will say, oh, you don't have to watch 2003, just skip that and just go straight to Brotherhood, which I completely disagree with. 2003 has a lot more emotion in it. 2003 shows the beginning of the two brothers' journey. Hell, I'm pretty sure if you guys was to rearrange a few episodes, take out a few episodes of the second half of the series of 2003 and take out the first half of Brotherhood and combine 2003 and Brotherhood together, you would get a fantastic, brilliant story. What I'm trying to get at is 2003 and Brotherhood need each other. Even though I think 2003 is better, in my opinion, because it's a lot more emotional and darker and more mature, Brotherhood gets bigger and cooler. The animation's nice, and yes, it does follow the manga, but there are anime out there that doesn't follow the manga, but they turn out to be really good shows. Again, Fullmetal Alchemist 2003 and Trigon. Although I wouldn't mind seeing a full adaptation anime of the manga of Trigon, just like they did with Brotherhood. And listen, if you guys love Brotherhood, that's perfectly fine with me. I'm not knocking you for that. But when I hear people say, oh, you don't have to watch 2003, just go and watch Brotherhood, don't waste your time on 2003. But in my opinion, I think 2003 makes you love the characters more. And you get attached to these characters, like Maes, Hughes, Nina, what Ed and Elle went through. The introduction and the journey that these characters came from was just fan-freaking-tastic. So please, if you're a Brotherhood fan, please give 2003 another chance. And tell people to go and watch 2003, then watch Brotherhood. Because both 2003 and Brotherhood need each other. One's mature and dark and emotional, and the other one is light, cool and massive. And you know what? I think we can all come to an agreement on this. That Fullmetal Alchemist is one of the greatest anime series of all time. Both versions. And that's it for me. Am I right? Am I wrong? Is there a part in 2003 that did better than in Brotherhood? Did I miss anything? Please let me know in the comment section below and let's get a discussion going. I'm Geek Freak. Peace out. Thank you guys for watching. And if there's a series you want me to check out and review and give my thoughts on it, or if there's a top 10 list you want me to do, or any reactions, or responses, or rants on anything geeky, just leave links and comments in the comment sections below, and I'll get to them as soon as I can. Don't forget to like, subscribe, put the bell on, share this video, and leave a comment in the comment sections below. And as for my social medias, I'm literally freaking everywhere! I'm on most video platforms, social medias, forums, and support sites. It's best to pause the video and see where I am. Literally all of this is down in the description box below. So if you want to go and check those out, please do. I'm Geek Freak.